Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the first edition of our forum on environment and climate change in the framework of the World Nature Protection Day. My name is Katia Perez. I am one of the organizers of this forum, along with my colleague Kiki, who is head of communication of this organization. Today, we welcome and thank Grant Linney, who will be opening this forum and who my colleague Kiki will introduce. Thank you so much, Grant.
Thank you, Katja. So it's my honor to introduce Grant Linney, our very first speaker for our very first forum. So Grant Linney is a career outdoor and environmental educator for kids and adults of all ages. He is passionate about connecting people to nature, both for their own well-being, as well as the well-being of the planet. He believes that if you connect with nature, you care about the environment, and this caring will spark empowerment and advocacy. After being trained by Al Gore in 2010, Grant has also delivered more than 1,000 presentations on climate change. So very well-seasoned speaker. So I'm very much looking forward to your presentation, Grant. The floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm going to start with two beach ball versions of the third rock from the sun. I think we can call them world views, and they are radically different. You may not notice, but the hands holding the globe on the left are female. That's the hands with the wedding ring. And the hands holding the globe on the right are male. And actually, you can see a ring there too. That was quite deliberate on my part. We talk about Mother Earth, and we talk about mankind, unfortunately. And these are just two radically different views. You look at Africa, the continent of Africa on the political globe on the right, and it's multicolored. That globe is more colorful. Of course, the colors are denoting borders and boundaries where humans have arbitrarily drawn lines. And the good news is there's culture and tradition with each country. The not so good news is there's a lot of conflict too. So it's the more colorful one, but I think the globe on the left is the more beautiful one. And it's just 4 colors. And I often say to students and give them a little brain twister to start with, I say, all right, 2 of the 4 colors represent the same substance in 3 different states of matter. And some students get it right away and others frown and have to think about it. And of course, I'm talking about white of ice and cloud and the blue of liquid water. We are a water planet, for sure. And then we have the green of living things, and we have the brown of high and dry. And if you rotate the globe on the left around, these same 4 colors repeat. No distinct borders, no distinct lines. You really get a sense of oneness. And I think we lose track of this image of Earth. When the astronauts first went into space and took the iconic picture, it was a bit startling for us to look back and see this. Even though that was many years ago, I think we're way too focused in with the globe on the right, and we need to remember where we come from. And this is the graphic from our conference organizers, and I love the title. And of the 2 globes you just saw, I know which one to embrace and which one I want to promote and remind people about. And that leads to a book. If you're really interested in it, you can write down the website, Love Your Mother, www.loveyourmother.ca. Since you are in Europe, you may need to go, I would imagine, Amazon. It's everywhere. You would be able to find it that way. This is a book I wrote this year. It just came out in August. And it's a series of stories about my own personal connections with nature dating back to when I was a teenager, and also my connections with nature as an outdoor and environmental educator spanning 6 decades. It's kind of hard to believe that. And it's just a series of memories of my encounters with nature and my sharing that with learners. And I'm this is a favorite picture of mine from the last outdoor school I worked at. And it was a school for boys, so that's why they're all boys. One of the stories I tell in the book is about, I call it serendipity, and it's just taking advantage of happenstance moments on a hike. Maybe you plan something else, but then you discover something, and the kids are really excited that they're involved in the discovery. So these are grade 3s. These are 8-year-olds. And we have a hike we do called Who's Been Here? And the first thing we do is set it out to me when I join you. So the kids are totally into it. And they run ahead and they find some sign of wildlife. It might be a footprint in the mud. It might be some strange scratches on the bark of a tree. And we look at them and we have to figure out what made those scratches. And we play detectives in a process of elimination, and I guide them a bit. And they finally get to the point of realizing it was a deer with its antlers rubbing the bark to get the felt off the antlers. And sometimes when it's time to lose their antlers, I think they rub up against the bark too. The antler itself, I planted out there. I didn't plant the tree. The tree had been there all along. The antler, and you can see the look of pride and satisfaction in these kids' faces. As far as they were concerned, they discovered the antler. I did not tell them that it was planned spontaneity. That didn't matter. When it came to the book and telling this story, as much as I would like to share this picture, I knew the story needed to be about more than boys, and the story needed to be about more than white faces. So I had an illustrator with a number of photographs that I had, and I asked them to translate them into a drawing. Here's the drawing version of this picture, and I think they did a great job. So we have girls, we have different minorities, and we have the same crowd. There's a famous environmental educator in the United States by the name of David Sobel, and he says no environmental tragedies before grade 4. First step, and the caring and the empathy that will drive a desire to tackle these issues. So another story I have in the book is about trees and trout. And we do a river study with grade 5s. And you can see the river in the picture. You can see that the kids are broken up into groups. The night before, I put on the chalkboard, true or false, trout need trees. Now, grade 5s are 10-year-olds. And ask them whether trout need trees, true or false, is a jarring question. They're not used to that kind of question. And some are quite literal. And they say, no, I've never seen a trout in a tree. And other ones are genuinely curious, and they sort of go, I think trout do need trees, but I'm not sure why. And then there's 2 more categories. One category is Mr. Linney's trying to trick me. They know me, so they're suspicious of my motives. And then the 4th category is undecided. Which happens in a lot of elections before the elections. I won't talk about the upcoming elections. I'm just crossing my fingers. So anyway, we have this discussion. I don't give them an answer that night. I talk to them about what we're going to do. And of course, when we get down to the bridge, we do notice all the trees, and I might playfully ask, hey, does anybody see a trout in a tree? And the kids will roll their eyes. And then we go and we catch critters. And this is what 10-year-olds want to do. Also, this is what 15 and 18-year-olds want to do too, is catch the living creatures in the river. And I use this to build a lesson. The first thing I do is I say, okay, I want you in groups. You're each going to take a sample. Normally I have orange pylons out, so students have a very well-defined area, and I say, I want you to stay within your sample, become experts, catch as many things as you can. If another group gets really excited, don't go rushing over to them. You keep fishing in your area because you might be the only ones to catch a certain bug. And we want to see how many different creatures we can catch. And I give them a target number. I say, if we can get 10 or more different creatures in the short time that we have for catching, that's a thumbs up. That's a really good sign. That's a sign of what we call biodiversity. And I talk about certain creatures as indicator species. So, for example, if we ever caught, and fortunately we have never caught this, a sewage fly larva, well, the name suggests the quality of the river or the water it would be in. However, if we catch what's in the under the picture of the river, that's called a stonefly nymph. And a stonefly nymph only lives in really healthy rivers. As a matter of fact, stonefly nymphs are trout food. And while there's no way we'll catch a fish in our nets, our catch nets, they're too fast. If we catch stonefly nymphs, we can say, aha, there are probably trout in this river. So that's cool. And then that night, we go back to talking about trees. And if it had been a hot day, I might say to the students, what did you do with that really strong sun? And they would often say, oh, well, we moved our collection tray in the shade. So we were out of the sun and keeping a bit cooler. And I said, you know what? Animals like shade too. Shade means cooler water. For trout and for stonefly nymphs and other organisms that are as fussy as them, the water temperature needs to be below 20 degrees Celsius, at least in parts of the water. And one of the reasons for that is because of the oxygen content in the water. The oxygen needs to be at least 9 milligrams per liter for for trout and stonefly nymphs. Carp or sucker only need 3, minnows need 6. So I'm building up a chain here. Shade means cool water. Cool water means if it's fast flowing, that it has oxygen in it. I talk about the roots of the trees and how they prevent erosion, and that has 2 impacts. Number one, it keeps the water deep, it keeps the water fast flowing, it keeps the water clear. Number 2, preventing erosion means that the gravel bottom of the river is not covered by soil from the banks. The trout need the gravel bottom for 2 reasons. That's where they find their food, stonefly nymphs, not mudfly nymphs, and that's where trout lay their eggs. And finally, the trees themselves provide insects, and sometimes those insects fly low over the water, and that's why fish jump. So here we've got this whole series of things that flow out of trees being by a stream, and really what I'm exposing my students to is what I call ecosystem thinking. It's all connected thinking. And I think it's an important part of educating students in the outdoors. If there's something called ecosystem thinking, I believe there's also something called ecosystem feeling. And that comes from spending time outdoors and feeling at home there and feeling an affinity, caring about your surroundings. And remember, I said that's what will drive your desire to fight climate change and other things. Here's a picture that I think could be titled Ecosystem Feeling. This is a group of senior students, high school students, 17, 18-year-olds on a canoe trip in a place called Algonquin Park in Ontario, Canada. And this is after dinner. So they're hanging out and enjoying each other's company and enjoying this gorgeous setting. they're in the midst of this wonderful environment, and surely they're getting ecosystem feeling out of this. When you develop ecosystem feeling, I think even more than ecosystem thinking, you really get both of them give you the sense that everything is connected. That's what science is about, whether it's physics, chemistry, or biology. It's about connections. The interesting thing is, it's not just scientists that say this. This is a modern day theologian by the name of Parker Palmer. To be is to be in relation. To be is to be connected. Unfortunately, and I don't know whether this is the same in Europe, but outdoor experiences are becoming increasingly extinct. Families are concerned about letting their kids go in the woods, stranger danger, and what if they get hurt, and so on. And schools are getting more concerned about, well, if there's an accident, when we get sued, so they don't really encourage going outside. And so then next week in Canada, we have a day called Take Me Outside Day. And I know the person who organized it, and I totally admire his intentions and his encouragement. It's called Take Me Outside Day because it's a message to teachers. Hey, take your kids outdoors within walking distance of the school, connect them with nature. And the fellow who started this, Colin, ran across the country from coast to coast, stopping at schools to get that message. And now he's got this National Take Me Outside Day. He's on the right track, but at the same time, I feel a bit sad that we have to have a day called Take Me Outside Day. What was once a natural part of growing up needs to be, we need a day on the calendar. And actually, it is extended to a week, October 21st to 25th. It should be the whole year, of course. David Sobel, I mentioned his name already. David Sobel has, and the book references there, very highly respected American environmental educator. And he has in this book what he calls a ladder of environmental responsibility. You can Google this, so you don't even have to buy the book. What he's doing here is showing you a series of step-by-step experiences for kids in the outdoors. Now, these are very focused on the schoolyard. That's great. And I don't think David would have any problem with my adding in, yes, but we also have to take our kids on walks within walking distance of the school to nearby parks to explore and be hands-on. But I really like this ladder. You notice climate change isn't dealt with until the 6th grade of elementary school. So that's 11, 12-year-olds. And even then, it's not about the global problem. It's a focus on, hey, what can we do in our own school to reduce our carbon footprint? So it's very local. Once you get to grade 7, what we call middle school in Canada, 11, 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds, then the curriculum opens up to talking about climate change. And I think students are ready to address it at that point. So yes, we have a problem, and it's shown by the extinction of outdoor experience, but it's broader than that. We have been framed, and we've been framed, and I go back to the 2 globes. We think a lot more about the political globe than we do the natural globe. And that political globe is a reflection of what is called mechanistic dualism. Well, it's a big phrase, but it's actually not that hard. Dualism means things are not connected. I am subject, and everything outside me is object for me to manipulate and control. And I regard things outside me as for my benefit, and I don't really feel connected to them. I don't feel responsible for them. I don't really care if I cause damage to them. Mechanistic dualism, well, just think of a mechanic. They have screwdrivers and they have pliers and they tighten and loosen and adjust and manipulate. It just fits with dualism, okay? And that whole view. Now, this is a wonderful quote from another American, a conservationist from the middle of the 20th century, Aldo Leopold. And I love what he has to say here. We abuse land because we regard it as a commodity belonging to us. That's dualism, okay? Subject to object, it belongs to us. When we see land as a community to which we belong, we may be able to use it with love and respect. Commodity and community are shown in the illustrations below. They're titled Ego. And notice man is on top. Notice woman is in the pyramid, but she's lower down. That's our painful, embarrassing history. And then look at the circle that our Aboriginal First Nations people have known by instinct and have lived through generations, and that we just forget. There's a profound difference between commodity and community. There's a profound difference between ego and nature. And we have to keep this in mind. Okay, I'm going to introduce you to three terms. Carrying capacity. When you get on an elevator, and I imagine this is the same in Europe, there has to be a plaque on that elevator that says the maximum load. How many people, how much weight? Well, it's also a scientific term, and it means an area's maximum permanently supportable load, okay? Now, if we have that definition of carrying capacity, sustainability fits in perfectly, and it doesn't have to be a complicated definition. This one's only 6 words long, staying within an area's carrying capacity. And when we exceed an area's carrying capacity, it's called overshoot. And overshoot is growth beyond an area's carrying capacity, and it happens for 3 reasons, all exponential. Our growth in population, the power of our technology and how much it's changed, and the power of our greed. We are sold a bill of goods. We are told that in order to be happy, we need to have stuff. We need to buy stuff. So those 3 things have a tremendous impact on our environment. And I created this graph a number of years ago, and you can see all the things that come from growth beyond an area's carrying capacity. When I first made this, I was pretty depressed. It was sort of, whoa. And then I started to realize, I remembered that the worldview I subscribe to is that everything's connected. And what that means here is that if I tackle one problem, for example, deforestation, I'll end up tackling the other problems. If I plant trees, I address loss of topsoil. I address threats to food production potentially. I address loss of biodiversity. All of them. I could take the time to go through and show you how they're connected. And of course, we wouldn't, if we really want to address overshoot, we wouldn't just take on deforestation. We would look at the other ones too. So this is often my first slide, and when people come in the room, when I'm doing a face-to-face, they'll go, Grant, there's something wrong with your computer, because it's the Microsoft warning sign. But I say, no, it's not my computer, it's just civilization. And then they read it and kind of nod. Yes, we do have a problem. And restarting doesn't mean pressing OK on a computer keyboard. There's more to it than that. It's not impossible, but we need to realize it's a challenge. When I deal with climate change, I do 3 presentations. And I've talked teachers into this, and occasionally I get one that's really tight on time and says, oh, I need you to squeeze them all into one session. But most people will have me come 3 times, ideally with a day or so in between each session, so students have a chance to absorb what I have to say, ask questions, and be ready for the next step. So the first question I ask is climate change, must we change? And this is the science of the problem, and it's very clear and compelling and kind of scary too, because it's something we've got to do soon. When I come back, I talk about climate change. Can we change? And the solutions out there are amazing, and they can solve the problem. There's no question there whatsoever. The third question is the tricky one. Given human nature, given our dislike of change, given our propensity for making money, will we change in time? And that's the tricky question. So I'm gonna go through each one right now fairly quickly because of my time. But this is a picture from the International Space Station. The thin blue line is the atmosphere, and I show you this picture because I want you to realize that when we put pollution into the air, that's where it goes, and it can't get out of the atmosphere. It's there. That atmosphere circumnavigates the entire globe, and it contains what are called greenhouse gases. And by far the most common greenhouse gas in the atmosphere is water vapor, which I remember being quite surprised about. And these greenhouse gases, they have this name because they perform two functions just like a greenhouse. Number one, they let the sun in. The sun hits water, the sun hits land, it heats things up, it gives us the warmth of life. Number two, these same greenhouse gases at night serve, while some of the heat escapes back into space, enough of it is kept in by this blanket of greenhouse gases that we are 30 degrees Celsius warmer than we would otherwise be. The average surface temperature for the entire planet from pole to pole, including the equator, is plus 14 degrees, or at least that's what it should be. If we didn't have this blanket, plus 14 minus 30 would be minus 16. We would be a frozen popsicle. There would be no life on Earth. The natural greenhouse effect is a good thing. However, there's a problem. And the problem is that humans are making the blanket thicker. And we all know what happens when you put an extra blanket on. You keep in more heat, ergo global warming. And you know what? It's as simple as that. How do we put more greenhouse gases into the atmosphere? The primary way, there are other ways, but the primary way is the burning of fossil fuels, coal, oil, gas, and wood for that matter. When you burn these substances, you release carbon dioxide. Most of the carbon dioxide actually goes into the oceans, but enough of it goes up into the atmosphere to make the blanket thicker. One other major cause is deforestation. Either forest burning, as you see in this picture, or cutting down trees to make way for cattle grazing or new developments. Trees are the largest plant on the planet. Trees store carbon. When you cut them down, that carbon is released. It's a significant contributor. Okay, so we have a thicker blanket. And as a result of we've had thermometers since the 1880s. And here's the 23 hottest years on record. And you'll notice that there's none from the 1800s. There's only one from the 1900s. And 22 of the 23 hottest years have been since 2002. That's not an accident. That's a pattern. That's a trend. That's a clear warning that we are heating up the planet. By the way, these are in order. So from left to right, 2023, this is the hottest on record currently, followed by 2020, and then you go down to the second row and so on. Scientists are already predicting that 2024, even though there's more than 2 months left, they're predicting it will be the #1 hottest. Okay. How much have we raised the temperature of the Earth? 1.4 degrees so far. I'm sorry, 1.2 degrees as of 2020. And what scientists have done is they've looked at that and they've said, okay, if the average surface temperature of the planet is now 15.2 instead of 14, what has that done to world weather patterns? And they've studied the patterns and they've done a big, oh, good grief. We have a lot more what are called heat spikes, where the temperature, even though the average temperature is up 1.2, it causes a low-grade fever with the planet. And in certain parts of the world at certain times, you will get a heat spike where the temperature will go way up. And Europe has certainly experienced extreme heat, and with it, fire and other extreme weather events. The all-time heat record is a little town called Turbat in Pakistan, and I'll bet they don't have any air conditioning. I can't conceive of 55.4 degrees Celsius. Last May, New Delhi in India came very close to that. Here's what concerns me, and when you look at the entire globe, the last 7 months of 2023, each of those months was the hottest month ever recorded. We've never had consecutive months like that. We are definitely heating things up. And to add further urgency, the first 8 months of 2024, each month was the hottest month ever. September 2024 is not part of that because it remains behind September 2023. But the point is we're heating up. No question about that. On June the 21st, 2024, remember I said the average surface temperature is 14, but now 15.2. Scientists thought for a long time we could raise the temperature from 14 to 16 without catastrophic climate change. 2 degrees Celsius was the window. When they looked at the records from 1.2 and went, wow, our weather is going wonky, they changed their mind and they said, okay, the new maximum is 1.5 degrees above 14. Well, last July 21st, it was 17.09. It was 2.09 degrees above. That only lasted for 24 hours as the all-time record. 17.16 the very next day. This should be viewed as alarming. When you have heat, you have melt. So here's a picture of the Arctic ice extent in June 1980. That's when the ice reaches its maximum each year, June. And then the Arctic summer kicks in and the ice melts. And then the winter returns and the ice expands. Well, that's June 1980. I want you to look at the difference between June 1980 and only 27 years later, June 2007. That's dramatic. And the loss of that ice does not just affect the Arctic itself, it's the refrigeration system of the planet. All that white reflects sunlight and therefore heat. And if you lose it and it's replaced by dark water, the light is absorbed and therefore there is more heat in the water too. And this disrupts the climate operating systems of the whole planet. Because of the loss of ice in the Arctic and the Antarctic, you have drought and flood, the opposite, in different parts of the world at different times. It's all connected. Remember that worldview? So extreme weather, we've always had fire and storms and flood. Now they're more frequent. Now they last longer. Now they're more intense. This is a picture taken last summer in Western Canada. That's a wildfire. And I know these have happened in Europe. I know Greece in particular has been nailed with wildfires, and they're out of control. It's very hard for firefighters to contain them. Many times they just have to stand back and let it burn out a bit and establish a perimeter. So this fire definitely got to homes. This is in the Yukon, northern Canada. Look at the size of the flames compared to the people. This was the summer of 2023 also. It was an absolute record year. I put this picture in because I would imagine that 20 minutes before this picture was taken, this house was intact. Fire hadn't hit it. But when a wildfire, a fire that feeds on itself, hits a wood frame home, poof. And I would say about 10 minutes after this picture was taken, the entire house was down. People got out, pets got out, no time for a moving van. A lot of stuff lost. This is the fire season in Canada, going back to 2000 and looks like 2016. And you can see May to October each year. And most years are grouped together, except for 2023. It's in a league of its own. And by the way, I didn't mean to jump ahead quite that quickly. 2024 is closer to the cluster, but it is the second highest. This is a picture from last month, the Amazon rainforest on fire. Very alarming. This is flooding in Western Canada, and you can see a section of the river has taken out a section of the bridge. And I would imagine about within half an hour of this picture being taken, this part of the bridge, notice how the water's piling up on it. I would imagine it got washed out also. Pakistan, August 2022, massive flooding. Now, Pakistan gets monsoon rains every summer. They expect flooding, but not on this scale. Climate change is a magnifying glass for monsoon rains and hurricanes, and it just makes things much, much worse. So tens of millions of people lost their homes, and I'm sure they're still struggling. It's not in the news anymore because other hurricanes come, but yeah, I'm sure they're still struggling and recovering. This is a city of over 1 million in Brazil last May. The entire city was evacuated because of flooding. Warmer air holds more moisture, and storms get stronger, and you just get a sudden dump of rain that can't be handled, especially by a city. This is the east coast of Canada. This house had been standing by the Atlantic Ocean for decades, and it had survived previous hurricanes. It did not survive this one, not only because Hurricane Fiona was big, but because it was made worse by warmer water and warmer air. The winds were stronger, the waves were stronger, it got washed away. You can see it's in the process of going into the sea. This is about 10 days ago in Florida, Hurricane Milton. Associated with Hurricane Milton were tornadoes. I didn't realize that connection until Milton came, but when you have a massive, unprecedented size hurricane, it can cause other weather disturbances. And this, surprise, surprise, this lady now has an outdoor kitchen. The IPCC is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and it's made up of climate scientists from all over the world. They don't create science. They get together every few years and they review the current research, and they create a summary or synthesis report. So the last one was 18 months ago. The first headline is from the London Guardian, and then you've got the New York Times, and you've got the Washington Post. They're all reporting on the same synthesis report from the IPCC. The first and last one talk about final warning and catastrophic warming, brink of catastrophic warming. The New York Times is a little bit calmer, but it still says the dangers of fossil fuels. They've named the actual problem, and also a blueprint to change course. Okay, so that's the problem. Must we change? Can we change? I can only touch on this quickly. And will we change? I'll touch on that quickly. This is really important to understand. This is from the International Energy Agency under the auspices of the United Nations. We've already got the answers. That's basically what it's saying. And you can look at the answers under different categories. So if I had time and I was delivering you a full session, I would go through each of these categories. The only thing I can mention right now is solar and wind. The price of operating them has plummeted and their growth has gone way up. That's really good news. Heat pumps, replacement for furnaces, getting completely off fossil fuels, very exciting development that's really taking off also. Then there's transportation, electric cars, electric trucks, planes being developed by, oh dear, I'm going to forget the name of the European aircraft manufacturer. You guys all know it, and it's just skipped my head. They now have prototypes of planes that run emissions free. They're not going to be commercially available till 2035 unless the government steps in and helps them. But this is really encouraging. Maersk is the largest shipping company in the world. They operate out of Denmark. Nobody told them to do this, but they know that bunker crude oil is one of the dirtiest fossil fuels going. So they are now building 8 new ships, super tankers, that run on emissions-free fuel. Really cool to see that kind of technology coming along. Construction, there's a Canadian company that when you manufacture cement, you release a lot of carbon dioxide. Well, they have found a way to keep the carbon in the cement and actually make it stronger. Wow. Here's a woman from Africa who takes our plastic bottles and makes them into bricks that are stronger than concrete. Here's a fellow in Western Canada. That looks like a concrete block. It's made out of hemp, lime, and water. So it's a lot lighter. It has excellent insulation qualities. You put it together like Lego. That's why there's those green plugs there. They stick into holes in the block below. It's called biofiber. Really cool. And universities, researchers at Purdue University in the United States have come up with a new color of white that has a really, really high reflectivity. And they're saying if you put this white on ceilings and, I'm sorry, on roofs and on the sides of buildings with a lot of sun, you won't need air conditioning because it really reflects the light. Agriculture, all I can do is just show you these. These are techniques to keep carbon dioxide in the soil. It's called regenerative agriculture. Very positive steps forward. And I could go on with others. I think I have one other one I'll mention. We call these natural gas stoves in North America. I'm trying to get people to realize natural gas is a fossil fuel. It should be called a fossil gas. And there are 2 drawbacks to it. You are burning a fossil fuel, first of all. And secondly, there's increasing evidence that burning natural gas with an open flame in the house leads to asthma in children. So there is an alternative now called the induction stove. And I'm sure these are available in Europe also. Okay, I'm going to move on to must we change? And this is the tricky, I'm sorry, I'm moving on to will we change in time? And yeah, this is the tricky question. This sounds strange at first. It's more important to change laws than light bulbs. I have changed all the light bulbs in my house to LED. That's great, but that's a personal change. What if the government passed a law that said the old incandescent light bulbs and the fluorescent strip lighting will become obsolete by a certain year? You won't be able to buy them anymore because LEDs can be made into strip lights like fluorescent, and they're just much more efficient and longer lasting. And we need the government to step in and make those kinds of changes. And the only way we're going to get the government to step in and do that is by speaking up and putting pressure on them. In Canada, when COVID came, you'll notice a whole bunch of steps that were taken, probably similar to in your country. And this is why we were successful in beating back COVID. These are system changes where the government imposed closing borders, closing all businesses except grocery stores and drugstores. It worked. Now, when it comes to fighting climate change, the Canadian record, yeah, we declared an emergency. The evidence is we're not listening to the science. I wish I had time to go through these with you. You notice a whole bunch of X's. We do have carbon pricing, which is also called the carbon tax and is quite controversial, even though economists recommend it. So a lot of X's. We're not doing nearly enough. This is a political cartoon of our government in power led by Justin Trudeau. He got in the last election saying he was going to do something about climate change. Well, this cartoon shows how much progress we're making and all the problems that are happening because we aren't making more progress. This shows carbon emissions from 1990 to 2020, the G7. Canada is all by itself with more emissions now than in 1990. So Canada gets an F. We're embarrassingly poor. Look at Great Britain and Germany, 46% and 39% below their 1990 figures. Canada has dropped, but it's still 14% above. This is an important part of fighting and speaking up. We need to name the enemy. And this is similar to the 1950s, where we had tobacco, and we discovered that tobacco caused lung cancer, smoking, and the tobacco companies tried to hide that and say, oh, no, no, no. And the oil companies are doing the same script. And the banks, while on the face of things, they want to say they're concerned about the environment, behind our back, they are funding more fossil fuel investments. And that's not just in Canada, that's elsewhere. That speaks for itself. We can't have both. This is Ray Sod is a Canadian cartoonist who beautifully depicts Canada's response to climate change so far. It's pretty feeble. I went to a 15-year-old student who's also good in art, and I said, I want you to do another version of this cartoon that shows what our response should be. Here's what she did. I love this. Look at the fierce look on everyone's face. Look at the fact that there's girls as well as boys. Look at all the equipment. Look at the group effort. If we get off our butts and do this, we can lick this. But our time is rapidly closing on doing that. Students will ask me, don't you get depressed talking about climate change 1,000 times? And this is my response. Better to be mad than to be sad. Sad is soppy. Sad makes you want to curl up and just go away, hide yourself. Mad motivates. Grr, I want to do something. So better mad than sad. And somebody got mad enough to create this brilliant sign, even though the holders are smiling. It's so true and embarrassing to us as adults. And before COVID, we had lots of climate protests, inspired by Greta Thunberg in many ways. Little bit of a problem for school kids. Greta did Fridays for Future climate strikes, and they were in the middle of the day, and kids would need to skip school. And you can see the sign, we are skipping our lessons to teach you one. Well, I went to my school board and I said, hey, can we have 2 days a year designated as climate action days where students can have a demonstration on school property during lunch hour, optional? And this is what's happened And it happened in 2023. It's going to happen again this year. I think my board is the only one in Canada that's doing that. And I would really like to see that expand. And I think I'm almost done. This is my title slide. I show it right. It's my second last slide, but it's my title slide. We have to speak up about the elephant in the room. And that's not for the young kids. They need to be immersed in nature and take that ladder of environmental responsibility. But once they get to once they're 12, 13, they can be part of this voice that's speaking up and saying, hey, why aren't we doing more about climate change? Last slide. This is what's at stake. And it is the only one we've got. And I am going to stop sharing. And I'm going to turn it back to our leaders, to Kiki and Katya.
Yeah, thank you so much, Grant, for this presentation, brilliant presentation. Yeah, tell me.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say thank you so much. I love the imagery that you started with. I think that really captures the spirit of your presentation so well with the two different globes. So yeah, fantastic. I think let's see if there's any questions in the audience. If anyone has anything,
Yes.
now it's your time.
I have one question, Grant. What could you say to those people who really believe that climate change is not the fault of us, of the human beings, and it's it's more than the result of the stage of the earth? There are many people who I have talked with them about climate change, and many people they say it's just one stage of our earth. It's not that climate change, we are making climate change. What could you really say? Because it's many times I just get kind of angry with such people, but well, I guess that they have their thoughts about.
Yeah. I have three responses. Number one, the straight response is to say, yes, there were definitely changes in the past. I live near one of the Great Lakes, Lake Ontario, and Lake Ontario used to be a tropical sea, and then it was a giant iceberg, and now it's a lake. Now that's taken hundreds of thousands of years for those changes. The changes that we are experiencing now are in decades. And the reason they're in decades is because it's a human impact. So that's the first thing I'd say. A lot of people who voice what you just mentioned, Katya, they will have yes, but, yes, but, yes, but. In other words, they'll have other arguments. If you answer that argument, they'll say, well, what about? And the good news is there are fewer and fewer people doing that. Since I've been doing this since 2010, I encounter much less doubt. My tactic is to give them one response, and then if they go, what about, I move on. I'm not going to spend time in an endless argument. I will step around them and focus on the people who get it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Are there any other questions in the audience? Yeah, Zoe?
Yeah, I wanted to ask because you organize different activities for different ages of children.
Yes.
So I just wanted to ask you, like, at what age do you think they can best understand, like, this subject and how important it is?
Well, I repeat what David Sobel from the United States says, no environmental tragedies before 10 years of age at the earliest. Okay? Young kids need to learn to love nature. They need time outdoors. And adults need to reacquaint themselves with nature. They need time outdoors too. Once kids reach the stage of middle school in Canada, which is around 12, 13 years old, the curriculum introduces climate change, and I would be able to cover most of what I did with you today with them. But I would break it up in 3 parts and make it manageable for them.
Okay.
You're welcome. Thanks for coming.
All
Thank you
right.
for the presentation.
Thanks.
If there is no other question in the audience, I think let's wrap it up because of the time, and I'm aware that you have your next presentation to go to, Grant.
Sure.
But just if anyone has a really quick question, now's your time. Let's take that as a no.
I give out a lot of information, so often people are in the absorbing stage.
Well, I have a lot of questions, but I'll send you an email, I think, because
Okay.
it's a bit too much to cover now. So
Right.
yeah, thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Thank you so much, Grant. Yeah.
Hopefully it was worthwhile.
Okay. You have a good evening, guys. Thank you so much for joining.
You're very welcome. Take
Thank
care.
you. Bye.
Bye.